Welcome to Evolved Radio, where we explore the evolution of business and technology. This week, the podcast is again focused on the managed service provider space, and joining me today is Richard Tubb, who is one of the best-known experts in the global IT managed service provider community. His track record speaks for itself, and he's launched and sold his own MSP before creating a leading media and consultancy practice. Richard is also the author of the IT Business Owner's Survival Guide, available on Amazon and other book retailers. And today we're going to be chatting about why you may need coaching as a business owner, areas of the businesses that people tend to struggle with most, and how technology is impacting both IT companies as well as businesses at large. If you enjoy the show, be sure to subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcast from. Also, be sure to check out the webpage evolvedmgmt.com/podcast for show notes, links to my guests, and to check out previous episodes. Now let's get started. Joining me today is Richard Tubb, IT business growth expert. Welcome to the podcast, Richard.
Thank you for having me, Todd.
So this is something that you've been doing for quite a while. I suppose the best place to start is really just start with your origin story. And so can you tell us a bit about your background, the MSP that you owned, and how you transitioned into the business that you're currently operating?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a massive IT geek, Todd. Like a lot of MSP owners nowadays, I started off as a technician. My background was one of working in the corporate IT arena. So I worked for companies like Ernst & Young and the NHS, the National Health Service here in the UK. And I think it was about 2001, although I'm of an age now where the timelines start to get a little bit blurred here. But about 2001, I struck out on my own, and I was your sort of typical computer guy crawling under desks, fixing Ethernet cables and doing stuff for small businesses. Did that for a couple of years. And then really the turning point for me was I read a book that hopefully your listeners, your community will be very familiar with. If they're not, I would hugely encourage them to check it out. A book called The ERP032 by Michael Gerber. It's a book that talks about systemizing your business and automation. That was a life-changing book for me. And I really went from being, the IT guy, the one-man band, to building a business. And that business grew fairly rapidly, really got into the MSP, the managed service idea and philosophy. Spent a lot of time in the US with some really smart people who sort of gave freely of their time and experience to me, which I'm very grateful for. And grew the business to the point where I sold it at the end of 2011. And I'd like to say, I really would like to say that I had a plan for what I was going to do next. But you know me a little bit now, Todd, so I'd be lying if I said that were the case. But what basically happened was during the time when I ran the MSP business, I used to write blogs and I used to stand up and talk in front of my peers at community groups just about the journey of being an IT business owner, the mistakes that I made, the things that went well, what was good, what was bad. And so what happened when I sold the IT business, sold the MSP business, a few of my competitors in the UK picked up the phone to me and said, hey, now that you're no longer a competitor, would you come in and share some of the secret sauce with us? And I was like, okay. I was only going to sit around otherwise and, just sort of twiddle my thumbs. So I started doing that work. And after about 6 months, realized that I really enjoyed helping other people, develop their leadership skills, develop systems for their business, and ultimately helping them avoid all the many, many mistakes that I made when I was an MSP owner. And that was, 7 years ago now, and I'm still doing it to this day, still doing the blogging. I do a lot of public speaking to conferences and user groups about running an MSP business. And life treats me very well, and I get a big kick out of doing it.
Excellent. So did you have a sense, like you said, there was no plan, but obviously you must have thought about what you would do after you sold. Did you think that maybe you would retire, or were you just waiting for inspiration to strike, or what was the thought when you left?
So I'll be absolutely upfront and honest with you, and this is no word of a lie. When I sold the business, my plan was to sit around in my pants and eat pizza watching TV all day.
That was the retirement plan.
People think that, and I thought no longer, than about 6 months or whatever. I thought, I'll sit around and I'll do that, because I'll be honest, running an MSP is a stressful job, and I just thought before I move on to the next chapter of my life, I'm going to ease off a little bit. But actually, I think it was 3 months in, I was going out to lunch with people. People were buying me lunch and saying, "Hey, can I pick your brains?" And do so. I was really enjoying it. And then I realized fairly quickly, I could do this again. And it's probably going to be healthier than me sitting around in my pants eating pizza all day. And so it developed from there. But genuinely, I had no conscious thought about MSP coaching, if we were to give it a tagline or a label, that being my next career. It just sort of organically developed that way.
Yeah, and the reason I ask is I think a lot of the MSP owners, as they get into their 10th year or so, some even longer than that, they start to wonder, like, what would retirement look like? And there's a lot of talk in the industry about merger and acquisition, but part of the resistance to that is, if I'm not doing this, then what would I be doing? So I think that conscious thought of, what's the next stage of my life is something that people may consider. Yeah,
it's a fascinating one. I was speaking to my friend here in the UK, a chap called Mark Matthews, who runs an MSP called ATG IT, and Mark is a veteran of the IT industry and has run it for many, many years. His MSP, hugely successful. And Mark won't mind me saying this, he has developed his business to the point where, I'm not going to say an MSP business is ever finished, but he is actually superfluous to requirements. Certainly his team would say that, but he's got a fantastic leadership team. He's got the business systemized. He's got it automated. He's got the best tools in place. And Mark and I were sitting and chatting the other day. He's in a good place and he's found new challenges outside the business to move on with. But he speaks to so many other MSP owners who have done the E-Myth thing. They've done, the leadership thing. They've read all the personal development books. So you're never finished as a leader. You're never finished as a business owner. But when there's a stage when actually the business doesn't need you that much. You're providing vision. You're providing high-level leadership. And there's a lot of people out there that struggle with that because they've got no plan with what to do next. So I'm really lucky. I fell into it. We've already established I didn't have a plan to do that. But I just wonder how many other MSP owners really need a bigger why or a justification for how they're living their life once they've achieved a certain level of success with their MSP. It's an interesting one.
Yeah, and I think that's a really perfect transition point in the conversation to chat about maybe the stages of the how and the why of someone might seek a business coach. What I see is there tends to be almost this mental resistance around feeling that it's a sign of weakness in some way, that they need to reach out for help. There's sometimes a little bit of hubris in sometimes it's just pride or just a lack of perspective around, well, if I can't figure this out on my own, does that mean that I'm failing somehow? If I need to ask for help, is that a bad thing? And it's what you touched on there is like, even someone who has a well-run business and is operating at a high level, there's still some value that they can find in seeking help from the outside. If it's simply perspective, if it's best practices, it's just a sounding board, someone to bounce something off of. Maybe we can chat a bit about the early stages and maybe the later stages of what does coaching look like? Why would someone seek out a business coach as an MSP owner? If this is their business, then shouldn't they be able to figure it out? Is maybe the question that we could answer.
Sure, and it's a really good question, and I absolutely agree with what you say. A lot of the business owners that I see who need the most, who would benefit the most from coaching or working with a mentor, are the ones who are the most resistant to it because they do see it as a sign of weakness. However, I alluded to the fact earlier that I've been really fortunate to spend some time with some of the most successful people, not just in the MSP industry, but in the wider IT industry, especially in the US. And every single person I've come across who has achieved any degree of success, however you define success, and success is different for everybody, but whoever I've spoken to has achieved a degree of success, has had mentors, has actively had coaches. So if these people at the top of the game are working with coaches, then why wouldn't anybody work with a coach? I mean, it's always been my philosophy to look at the most successful people who are out there, look at the people I want to emulate and pick the best things that they do, the best habits, the best tactics that they use, and use them myself. It's imitation the greatest form of flattery and all that type of thing. So why anybody would try to do it on their own as opposed to using a business coach, a consultant or a mentor, sort of escapes me a little bit. And I do think it just boils down to ego alone, to be perfectly blunt about it.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. You look at any other pursuit in life outside of business, almost anyone has a coach. Teams have coaches, individual athletes have coaches, and they put an extreme value on the incremental shifts that can bring in their performance. And even in the high levels of business, I think that's probably something that maybe doesn't get exposed as much. But I guarantee that, as you say, people that perform well in business or running multi-million-dollar businesses, they absolutely have had mentorship, and they probably still have mentorship. Even from people that are maybe not as successful as them in some aspect. But that's almost not the point. It's more the perspective. It's more about the accountability. There's a lot of aspects that are important to coaching, independent of just the knowledge that you may be able to acquire as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just share a story, something that springs to mind on that very topic. One of my great business heroes is the author David Allen, who wrote the book GTD, Getting Things Done. I was, and I should say that's like E-Myth, that's another life-changing book for me. And if any of your community listeners have not read GTD, drop what you're doing and go out and grab it. It's, a fantastic book about productivity. Anyway, to the point that, I was fortunate enough to spend some time having dinner with David Allen recently. And he was sharing with me that he still does one-on-one coaching with specific clients. And without using any names, he actually said that one of his clients, long-term clients, was one of the heads of the World Bank. Every month, this guy would spend time with him, and every month, this guy would bounce ideas and learn things and move forward with things. Now, the World Bank, big organization, and somebody who's near the head of the World Bank, that's crazy. You just think they've got it all sorted, and yet they've still got a mentor, they've still got a coach, albeit, a world-renowned one. And so I think you're absolutely right in what you say. I don't know anybody who achieves any degree of success in business, in politics, in sport, in anything, who doesn't seek out and actively soak up the advice of a mentor or a coach. Yeah,
it's so true. Any walk of life, whatever you're trying to achieve, there's something you can learn from somebody, right?
Absolutely.
So what do you see as the areas that are of focus? And maybe we can split this out into sort of the two categories of more the emerging market, kind of those 5 to 10 person shops, or the smaller groups, and then the groups that are maybe 20 plus staff. We'll start with the lower end. What do you find are the aspects that those groups tend to need a lot, or that they really find value in when they're in conversations with you?
So I think there's some similarities between the two groups. I'll talk about specific differences that I see, but the one thing that's the same across the board is the need for the business owner to actually extract themselves from the day-to-day running of the business. I'll give you an example. I was working with one MSP, 4 members of staff, a growing business. The business owner realized that they needed to extract themselves from the business because they were doing too much tech stuff. And so I helped them down that road. I helped them systemize and automate the business. I helped them get stuff out of their head, and pass and delegate responsibility to others in the team. And they've reached that stage and the business is growing. But likewise, I've seen people who are in, say, a 20-person business, and they are still the roadblock within their business. They're still the bottleneck within their business because they've got rid of the technical stuff. But say, and I'm thinking of one specific MSP I spoke to, who is a multi-million-pound MSP, really successful. But all the billing, all the invoicing within the business went through the business owner. So if the business owner, I mean, you and I we can see each other and we're nodding, because anybody listening to this will immediately jump to the conclusion, well, what if that guy or girl's not available to do the invoicing? What happens to the invoicing? It's absolutely crazy. And yet the business owner hasn't come to the realization that they really need to delegate that. They need to systemize it. They need to hand it off to someone else. How much more successful could their business be if they actually got rid of that responsibility, if they delegated it, if they empowered somebody within their business to do that? And the flip side of the coin is, how terrifying is it that, if that person gets knocked over by a bus or what whatever tomorrow. We like to think these things don't happen, but they do. Where is the business going to go without that one person to do the billing? How much chaos is that going to cause for them to go and do that? So I think there's a lot of similarities between the small businesses and the big businesses of the challenges they face. Sorry, go ahead, Todd. Yeah.
I think delegation is a really key one. It's one that I tend to talk about a lot. One of the areas I tend to try to focus on a lot is the management framework and the management skills. The interesting part is you say there's similarities between the 10 and the 20, and it's absolutely true. The way I often describe this to people is once you start to hit 10 is you need to develop a management layer underneath you. It's that first growth pain. And then every time you double your company, you're basically starting over on that process. So without delegation, you're never going to scale your company. And I think the part that people miss in that is they feel, okay, well, I need to remove myself from the business so I can focus on other things. The other half that is maybe not as visible to people is that's how you develop your staff and keep them actively engaged by giving them more and more responsibility and handing things off to them through that delegation process. People will remain loyal, and that's how you get higher retention, more engagement from the staff. So it's sort of that dual-pronged approach of why delegation and a management framework is so critical to the growth of your business. It's not just for you, it's for everybody else as well.
Absolutely. Could not agree with that more. And one of the, I'm going to categorize it as a leadership skill that I actually try and impart upon the smaller MSPs that I work with, is that they need to not only lead by example, so they need to be seen by their staff, by the members of their team to be doing the right things, but to actually empower the people that they're working with to actually grow as individuals themselves. Because otherwise you're going to hit all sorts of, you're basically going to outgrow the people within the business. Whereas if you're building a culture of personal development, of self-improvement, of delegation, of systemization, if you're building that into the culture, these people can grow with you within the business. And they in turn can teach the new people who are coming in to do things in the right way. Otherwise you just hit the same issue again and again and again. And I see way too many MSPs desperately trying to recruit people into their business, trying to create resources for a challenge that they really should have solved ages and ages ago, instead of just making these random hires and trying to bring somebody through the door super quick, which rarely works, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what are some other aspects? We kind of touched on the management and a bit of the process pieces. Any of the technical aspects or the sales aspects? You like to focus a lot on business growth as well. Obviously, that would have a revenue addition component to it.
Yeah, so I think for the smaller businesses, obviously they reach a certain point, and most businesses have grown through word of mouth. Sales and marketing is something that most small businesses, it's like, oh, that stuff just happens. We're lucky if we get some new leads through the door. We don't actively go seeking them. But of course, you can only grow to a certain level by that word of mouth. And if you want to grow any faster, if you want to grow any bigger, you need to be taking the steps, doing the activities consistently to bring that in. So one of the first challenges is marketing. Okay, how do we go about marketing? So I basically try to impart on people, the mistakes that I made when I was trying to do marketing for my business to begin with, and some of the really old-fashioned things that still just work. So business networking, for instance, is a huge one for small businesses. Get out there as the business owner, meet people. People do business with people they know, like, and trust. That was true 20 years ago. It was true 10 years ago when I was running an MSP, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be true in another 10, 20 years' time. Yeah,
that's an important one as well. Like not to hide too much behind the keyboard. The technical people, they tend to focus a lot on SEO and Facebook ads and things like that. And there's still the legwork required in building relationships and developing that network. I think it's a really important point for people to remember, especially the technically minded folks. They tend to default to those things that they're a little more comfortable with, right?
Exactly, yeah. And it's about moving outside that comfort zone. And to that point, one of the big challenges I see is perhaps once the marketing is impact and you've got a steady stream of new leads coming through, the business owner, who often is a techie, often not really comfortable with going into sales situations and stuff, then typically tries to make, or almost often makes the mistake of abdicating responsibility for sales. And what I mean by that is they will bring a salesperson in and believe it's going to be like a magic wand that's waved and their sales problems goes away. Whereas you and I and anybody who's listening to this, who's ever hired a salesperson knows those, and this is no disrespect to salespeople, but those people can be more trouble than they're worth. If you can do the sales for yourself within the business for as long as you're able to do, perhaps forever, if you can do that, it's going to be a lot easier than trying to recruit salespeople and bring them into the team. That is a huge effort and isn't something you can just say, right, we're going to get a salesperson in and all our sales woes are going to go. That person needs managing, they need a process, they need,
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm a big fan of principle-led sales for as long as possible, as you touched on as well. And again, not to disparage salespeople, they're incredibly important, and I don't think that people understand how hard that job is. So not to disrespect, but I do have a tagline around salespeople is that the salespeople are often best at selling themselves. So just be cautious. I know many people that go through this process in trying to hire their first salesperson, and it is churn and burn for the first little while. They really struggle to find that person that can, especially in MSP, selling service-based contract, value-based contracts is actually way more difficult than selling boxes. So the transition for any type of salesperson to get keen to that is difficult to begin with. The other part is, I think if you're going to hire as a salesperson, assume that you're going to be partnered with them. They're going to shadow you for 6 months before they're really useful. And I'm talking about every meeting you go to, that person comes along with you and they're learning as they go. If you assume that you're going to hire a salesperson and a month later they're hitting the street and bringing in deals, it's not going to be a good time, right?
Couldn't agree more. And again, this feels like we're beating up salespeople here. And why not? They can put up with it, can't they, Todd? But typically, 6 months in, they'll have a really powerful excuse for why the sales are not coming in and how they just need another 3 months to do it. So abdicating responsibility for sales is not a good idea in my experience.
Yeah, and as you said, it sounds a little like we're being a little rough on them. I think more importantly, we're exposing the truth that more people will find in the business owners that this is not, as you said, it's not a magic wand. You need to be prepared for hard work to enable them and get them set up for success. And that's not like in management. It's not a discredit to the individual. It's maybe a discredit to the lack of training and structure. It's the process that causes the issue, not the person in a lot of cases, right?
Yeah, and I'll just add, a sort of a final point on that sales conversation there. I was definitely in that category of, okay, the sales needs doing, but I'm really not comfortable with doing it. And rather than abdicate responsibility and try and find a salesperson, wave that magic wand, I did the uncomfortable thing and put myself through sales training. Happy to share it. I went through a program called Sandler Sales Training, which lots of people are very familiar with. If you're not, the idea behind Sandler is it's a consultancy-based selling. It's not your traditional image of a hard-nosed salesman who's trying to find the close, which most of us in the IT industry are not comfortable with. What it's basically doing is teaching you how to listen more than you talk, which, as you can imagine, for somebody like me, Todd, who likes to talk a lot, that was a huge challenge to learn in the first instance. But to ask the right questions, to build up trust and rapport with people. And anyway, to cut a long story short, what I found was, that resistance I had to go into sales meetings because I was trying to make the sale. Once I'd done some sales training, Sandler in my instance, it wasn't a sales meeting I was going to anymore. It was like an opportunity to help somebody. It was a local business person who I could go in, sit down, listen to what they've got to say and offer assistance and help. And fundamentally, I think the vast majority of us in the MSP industry get into it because we want to help people. So if you can learn how to turn those sales meetings from being, almost a confrontational, a traditional sales meeting into how can I help this person? Then suddenly sales doesn't become a chore. It becomes something you actually really look forward to.
Yeah, no, it's really well put. I had a previous guest on, Rob Malik, and he has a book called Selling More by Selling Less. And a similar idea that, you're basically asking a bunch of questions to help them convince themselves that they need your help, rather than you just, the traditional knock on IT sales is it's the speeds and feeds. I'm going to tell you why this technology is amazing and here's everything I can do. And it kind of overwhelms people and makes them feel out of their element. And if you just talk about their business problems and paint a picture of the future for them, the conversation changes dramatically. So let's talk a bit about more the technology side of things as well, since MSPs, they grow into the business, but they definitely start with the technology, as you said. What are your thoughts on how technology and its pervasiveness through all types of business is creating either disorder or opportunity for the MSP business owners, and the technology stack, how they're delivering in those different verticals?
I think it's a really interesting broad topic, and I've seen some changes in 20 years ago I was working in corporate IT, and I brought a lot of the ideas from corporate IT, which was standardization, scalability. I brought all those into the MSP space and implemented those. And then, spent 10 years in the MSP space putting those ideas in. And then everything changes because the standardization piece, for instance, all of a sudden people are going out, there's bring your own device, BYOD. Anybody nowadays goes out and just pretty much buys whatever hardware they want. So that idea of standardization, I'm not saying it's gone out the window because it's still a good idea in slightly bigger environments. But for most small businesses that MSPs are dealing with locally, the owners just go and buy their own kit nowadays. And so the challenges for MSPs has changed from being that standardization and scalability to how do we cope with all these various different pieces of hardware? How do we manage it? And of course, the common denominator in amongst all of that is the people. So, okay, it goes from managing devices, managing pieces of kit that are out there, although there's still a part of that. It goes to how do we manage the users? How do we manage the end users' expectations? We've got the cloud there now, so thankfully things are matured enough to really, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say it doesn't matter which device we're using. The majority of the actual the data is in the cloud, and for a lot of cases the functionality is in the cloud as well. And so it comes down to how can we help the end users understand how to use that functionality, how to use that data more effectively. So perhaps I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, looking into the future, but I think longer term, the MSP's role will not be so much doing perhaps what you and I have done back in the day, Tubb, which is managing devices, looking after infrastructure. It's going to be more about helping people understand the power of the technology, how the data can be used, how to streamline workflows, processes within business for efficiency. This phrase digital transformation that's thrown out there, it's at the big corporate arena, but for small MSPs, it's really important. I used to talk about I wanted my MSP to be the business that my clients wanted their business to be. Obviously, my clients didn't have MSP businesses, but they wanted businesses that provided good customer service. They wanted to be efficient. They wanted to be a sales machine. They wanted to have good onboarding for new clients, all of those things. We provided that with our MSP business. And the technology actually didn't matter so much. It was to do with the business processes, the culture of the business, and just how we dealt with the day-to-day interactions. And so some of our clients would approach us and say, interesting, you've always got the right answers for us when we phone up with any type of question. How do you do that? And so we would talk to them. In our world, it would be PSA tools, professional service automation for MSPs. But in their world, the equivalent would be CRM tools, or it would be business process tools. And so we'd say, hey, this is how we do it within our business. We don't carry all this information around in our head. When you phone us up, much as we'd like to pretend that we are geniuses and know all of this, what we're actually doing is tapping on, the shared brain that we've got in front of us. In our world, it's a PSA. In your world, it's a CRM. Let's talk to you about how you can do that within your business. And, we were doing that sort of 10, 15 years ago. And I truly believe that's going to be the future of that business there, not crawling under tables as I started out and plugging Ethernet cables in or before that it was token ring.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. I think this is more the extension of the, as I continue to point to the evolution of the industry, right? originally people were very fearful of the cloud. And if you remember this, maybe 5-7 years ago, people were saying, well, we can't sell these big projects and giant exchange servers. This is where we make half our money. And there was a lot of fear around this. And my view was always, that stuff's actually pretty difficult to manage. So the hidden costs of maintenance around that stuff is actually a big burden to the business. So if we're going to spin up an exchange server that we just add users to in the cloud and we never have to worry about it being broken because someone else is responsible for repairing it, cool. But that implies that you're doing a value-based contract and you're still delivering value to the client. And I think what we're touching on here is that sort of the next shift in the industry. First, it was away from the VAR, the reseller, the break-fix mentality to the MSP fixed fee, supporting the client based on a value-based contract. And now the next step is, okay, generally the technology works. Hopefully we've standardized your stack and the delivery of the technology enough that it's not problematic. Now we need to go hunting for that technical advantages that we can eke out in your business. What are your peers and your competitors doing that give them those 5% mover advantages here and there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give a really, what I think is a strong example, just as a wake-up call to any MSPs listening to this and are not quite sure of it. There's one of the clients, one of the MSPs that I work with is a Google Apps. I was going to say traditionally we call them a reseller, but a Google Apps MSP. All of the kit that's there is Google boxes, Google Chromebooks, Google Cloud. This stuff doesn't need a lot of maintenance because Google do it all. And I'm a Chromebook user, a massive fan of Chromebooks myself. It's essentially a brick, though. If you don't, if you lose the thing or if you haven't got the data in the cloud, it's just a brick. Despite that, if I look across all of the MSPs that I've worked with over the past few years, this Google Apps reseller has actually got the highest revenue per user on a monthly basis than any others. Now, how can that be? Because theoretically, they do the least amount of work. The devices don't need managing. The Google Cloud hardly needs managing. And yet they're charging more than MSPs who do, dare I say, traditional infrastructure, looking after Windows servers and desktops. How can that be? And the answer is they provide more value. They let the business owners that they work with do the things that they really want to get on with doing, because all of their time is freed up to do essentially business consultancy as opposed to, doing defragging and patching and things like that. So, if that doesn't convince you, I'm not sure what will, but I truly believe that, the actual device that you're using really doesn't matter. And I'm a Chromebook user, so that should tell you everything you need to know.
Right. Yeah. No, it's a really important point that, it's sort of the damned if you do, damned if you don't situation that a lot of IT service providers face, where I have to call you all the time. What are you doing for me? And then you fix everything, and they're like, well, I never call you. What am I paying you for? Right? So
absolutely.
It's like, well, what do we do here? So what you're alluding to is exactly that you still have to provide a level of value. So how are you doing that? Is it through consulting services? Is it business value? A lot of people are looking at the virtual CIO practice as an element to do this. And I think it gets away less from that commoditization. Anyone can fix a computer. There's nothing special about that. If you do it in a way that people feel valued and they feel it's a high touch customer service approach, that's different. And if you're providing some business insight that allows them to do business slightly differently or with less pain, that's the value that you provide. And I think a lot of people miss the fact that because we're technology people, you're an expert in things that you don't feel are really that complicated. And this is sort of this hidden piece to the industry that when you're doing tech support, these little quick, easy fixes that people go, oh, that's amazing. You're such a wizard, blah, 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 gives you that ego boost. It's because they don't know. And it seems simple to you. But then you get into the technology space. A simple example that I saw this week is pixeling for SEO or for email delivery, that you can get alerts when people open an email, that you can follow people around on the internet for retargeting. And most people in technology know about those things, but anyone outside of technology doesn't know about those things. So that's the value that you can provide is, hey, did you know you can use technology to do things like this, right? Did you know a CRM could help you manage your clients more coherently and have all this information spread across the rest of the team? That's the advantage that you can give to people because it's not common knowledge, despite the fact that you feel that it's common knowledge simply because you're a technical person, right?
Absolutely. And to bring this round to the start of our conversation, which is, why should MSP owners require coaching or work with coaches? Quite often, the answer. We know what needs to be done to run our business and to grow it. But when you've got your sleeves rolled up and you're in the middle of it, it's quite difficult. And so, a lot of the business owners that I work with, the MSP owners, tell me that they work with me, not because they have revelations every 5 minutes, the stuff that I'm teaching them, but because I allow them to have another voice in the room. They can bounce ideas off me. They can have a sanity check. It's really easy to be the sole business owner and to know what you need to do, but just that voice, that imposter syndrome, that doubt inside to be saying, yeah. So when you speak to somebody who you respect and who has been there, done that, and isn't emotionally involved in the situation, can then say to you, yeah, you should go ahead and do this, or this person's behavior is not the right way forward, or do you really want to be working with that person? Listen to your gut feeling, or whatever it might be. So, for lots of MSP owners who are looking to provide those type of services to become what we used to call the trusted advisor to their clients, to go back to the top of our conversation, if anybody's wondering why they should have an MSP coach or to work with somebody like that, it's exactly the same answer for you. You don't need to be learning everything that you need to know about to run a business, but it is really handy to have somebody there who can do a sanity check, who can hold a mirror up, and who can just help you to find the answers that you perhaps already know.
Yeah, I think that's huge. So much of it is about perspective, and more than anything, right? And having that external perspective. The expression I've heard that I like is you're inside the bottle, so you can't read the label, right? You need somebody else to read the label on the outside. And it's true. I mean, even in our businesses, you get tunnel vision, and then you have a conversation with someone who's a bit more objective, and they just ask a couple of questions, and you're like, you're right. You're absolutely right. This all makes clear sense to me, even though like you said, you knew the answer, but having that validation and that perspective is incredibly cathartic in how you make the decisions going forward, right?
Exactly. And there's a degree of that. Just if anybody's listening to this and thinking, here's two MSP coaches shilling for their own services. Trust me, look, the way, we give this information away for free, there's only so many people that you can actually work with as a consultant, as a coach. You can gain some of these abilities that we just talked about, gain some of these insights by talking to your peers more often. You can join communities. There are groups out there like HTG peer groups. ConnectWise have got user groups, Autotask have got user groups, there's Taylor business groups, there's other communities out there where you can, your local user group, everybody's got one just down the road, and if you don't have, start one and watch how many other MSPs come to join you to talk about being in the same boat as you. You can bounce these ideas off other people. You can get the sanity check. The difference between dealing with peers and dealing with mentors, so I'm talking about somebody who would give their time away for free to help you, and dealing with coaches, somebody you would pay for that advice, is you don't have to feel embarrassed about picking the phone up to a coach anytime you want. You are not imposing upon them. They are paid to be at the other end of a phone, to be at the other end of an email or an instant message for you. Whereas whilst you can get the same sort of benefits from working with peers or working with a mentor who gives freely of their time, you can't pick up the phone at any given time that you want, because you might be imposing upon that other person. So for anybody who's never worked with a business consultant, a coach, I would say just go out and speak to your peers. If you want to move on to the next level, go and join a community group or a peer group. And if you, by that point, you should realize actually there's a lot of value in having somebody at the other end of a phone that I can call pretty much any time, day or night. Just get the stuff out of your head, get it onto their plate, and get a sanity check behind it.
Yeah, 100% true. And I think what you touched on in the beginning is you can get the knowledge that you need. Where I think the coach makes a difference in the way that I tend to position myself is it's a lot more about the execution than it is the knowledge. And I see this is particularly particularly prevalent in the MSP space, where people go into this knowledge collection phase, and 2 years later, they haven't really done anything. They just continue to absorb as much as they can. And they struggle with that execution. And in fact, there was a blog post that I had up a while ago that someone contacted me afterwards and said, wow, man, like there's a lot of info in here that's kind of proprietary. Like you maybe shouldn't give all of this away. And I said, I don't really care, because the knowledge is easy. The execution is the hard part, right? So just because you know something doesn't mean you're going to be capable of executing on it. And that's where I think the accountability of a coach to keep you focused, keep the entrepreneurs away from those shiny objects and just knuckle down and do things to make incremental change week by week. That's how you make progress.
Oh, could not agree more. And, this surprises some people. It really shouldn't. But I've got a coach now. I've got more than one coach for different aspects of my business and personal life. I always have had. I've also got mentors. I've also got peers, of which I count you amongst, Todd. There's something on my mind. I might drop you an email and say, hey, what do you think of this? How do you do this? Or what's your experience with it? But I've also got coaches that I can say, this is really playing on my mind. What do you think about it? So it never goes away. And as I said, if the head of the World Bank can still have a business coach to bounce ideas off, I'm pretty sure that suggests that the rest of us mere mortals should probably have one as well.
That's right. Yeah. Well, this has been fascinating, Richard. I could spend probably a couple of hours going through more of this. We can chat offline a little more. But in interest of everyone's time and attention, we'll look to wrap it up. If you have any parting words of wisdom, any asks of the audience, feel free.
Yeah, absolutely. I love talking to MSP owners. I'm very active on social media. If anybody wants to reach out to me, they can find me at www.tubblog. That's tubblog.co.uk. Plenty of my thoughts on the MSP industry and all the mistakes that I've made, the ones we've talked about. You can find all them up there as well. You can find me on Twitter, connect with me on LinkedIn. But send me a message and say why you want to connect. Don't send me one of those boilerplate messages. Don't say, hey, I want to connect on LinkedIn. Well, what use is that? Anyway, I'm still in coaching mode here, aren't I, talking, trying to teach people about networking. But yeah, just all joking aside, get in touch and continue the conversation. I just love talking to MSP owners.
Okay, great. Any media appearances? Obviously, if people are in the UK and want to come see you speak, any spots they can see you?
Absolutely. There's a few coming up. Rather than list them, again, you can find a list of which conferences I'm speaking at on my blog, and just about to start doing a few more speaking appearances talking about my book, which is the IT Business Owner's Survival Guide. So that one's going to be out there. And if that's the only promo or shill that I throw into this interview, then I think we've done quite well here.
Awesome. Appreciate your time, Richard, as always, and all the best.
Thanks very much, Todd. It's been a blast.